So, let me just show you. I'm a Christian. This guy is a Muslim. I was doing a presentation about the Christian faith. He just rudely interrupted. Now I'm going to bust his ass and show him that he doesn't understand his own book. So, let's just do it. I wasn't talking. I was talking about Christianity over there. You interrupted. Surah 12:41. Let's show him. He just said crucifixion isn't in his Qur'an. Now I'm going to show you how ignorant you are.
What is it, Surah what?
Surah 12, ayah 41. Are you listening?
Surah 12, ayah 41.
Oh, my two companions of the prison, as to one of you, he will pour out the wine of his Lord to drink. As for the other, he will hang from the cross. What is it called when you hang someone from the cross? Crucifixion.
But what about he say there's different translations?
Let's pull up.
Of the English
Let's
text.
pull him up. Let's pull him
The
up.
words of the English.
What is it to hang someone from a cross?
Where does it say cross? Show me cross.
There, look, hang from. Read it.
No.
Read
That's
it.
what I gotta do.
Read
I gotta
it.
do get someone who knows the Arabic language so he can tell me what that means.
It means crucifixion.
I go by scholars. I don't go by my.
Let me show you scholars. Let me show you scholars. Because you, bro, are busted. Sahih International reads, O two companions of prison, as for one of you, he will give drink to his master of wine, but as for the other, he will be crucified. So I've now given you two Muslim scholars who both say crucified, and one Muslim scholar who says hanged from a cross. Are you willing to concede you were wrong?
No.
So this is the ignorance and the arrogance.
He's an enemy of Islam, and he will never extinguish.
Is Dr. Mustafa Khattab an enemy of Islam?
No.
He says crucified. Dr. Mustafa Khattab, he says crucified.
In Surah Yusuf 12:41, Joseph interprets the dreams of two Egyptian prisoners. He tells one of them that he will be crucified and birds will eat from his head. In the original Arabic, the verse reads, yuṣlabu fatakulu tayru min rasih. The word yuṣlab is derived from the root sad lamba, which explicitly means to crucify, to fix the body on wood, or to hang on a stake. This verb does not mean to kill in a general sense. It refers to a very specific form of execution, death by crucifixion. In Semitic tradition, this root carries a strong association with a public, painful method of punishment, not a metaphorical death or an illusion. The Qur'an uses this word elsewhere, including in Surah 4:157, in the exact same linguistic context. Ironically, in that verse, the Qur'an states that the Jews did not crucify Jesus, but it uses the exact same verb, yuṣlabu, they crucified him. This reveals a clear inconsistency within the Qur'an itself. In one place, crucifixion is affirmed as a real and valid method of execution, while in another, it is denied, but only in the specific case of Jesus. The Arabic word salaba is not metaphorical. It is not a general word for killing or causing suffering. It is a technical, specific term that unequivocally refers to physical crucifixion on a cross or stake. Even in classical exegesis, such as Tafsir al-Jalalain, the interpretation remains literal. The man will be crucified and birds will eat from his head. This is further confirmed by Yusuf Ali's translation, which does not attempt to obscure the literal meaning. If the Qur'an affirms crucifixion as a legitimate method of execution, used within the divine will as a form of judgment, then why is it vehemently denied when it comes to Jesus, one of the most highly honored prophets in Islam? This is not merely a theological issue. It is a matter of linguistic and historical consistency. And most striking of all, if the verb salaba in Surah 12:41 is literal, then based on Arabic semantics and intellectual integrity, there is no reason to treat salabuhu, they crucified him, in Surah 4:157 as metaphorical or symbolic. If Muslims insist on doing so, then they are undermining the very integrity of the Arabic language of the Qur'an itself.
Is Sahih International an enemy of Islam? No, but they say crucified.
You're an enemy of Islam.
So do you disagree with them?
No.
So they say crucified. So were you wrong?
Then I have to go back.
You said the Quran didn't have crucifixion in it. I've just shown you.
What about in your book?
Now,
Jesus said,
now, one second. One second. Now, one second. Now, one second. Who was speaking at this time? Who was speaking at this time?
Don't be too rude.
Who was speaking at this time?
Don't be rude.
Who was speaking?
Are you afraid?
Jacob. Jacob was reading.
Are you afraid of your book?
Jacob was reading.
I just said to you.
Jacob was reading.
I just said to you that it may have
It says it. Look, it says it. Look, it says it in 12:38. Look, He says, I follow the faith of my fathers Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. It is not right for us to associate anything with Allah in worship. This is part of Allah's grace upon us. And, O my fellow prisoners, which is for better many different lords of Allah.
He's a non-Christian hater.
Okay.
He's not Christian himself.
So, whatever idols you worship instead of him are mere means. Are you listening? Okay? The one that he's speaking, he's talking in the time of the pharaohs. He's talking in the time of Egypt. Okay? Crucifixion wasn't invented at that time. We know who invented it. The Assyrians. And then the Babylonians invented it. The Assyrians improved it. The Persians popularized it. And the Romans perfected it. That's the quick history of crucifixion.
Where was Jesus from?
That's not, what's that got to do with this? Go on. What's this got to do with this? Your Quran. Go on. Yeah.
Because Jesus, where was he from?
He was from Palestine.
From Palestine.
Yes.
What was he?
He was a Jew. Yes. What's that got to do with crucifixion? In your Quran.
I'll show you.
Oh, in your Quran. This passage.
What's that got to do with Christian? Allah knows best.
In other words, you don't know. You've been taken off your script, and like every other dawah guy gang here, you're completely clueless. You're completely clueless. When was crucifixion invented?
It was invented in the time of Jesus, peace be upon him.
No!
Jesus,
You're ignorant, bro!
Listen,
Right, let me tell you. Go on, tell us.
Bro, in the time of Jesus, Isa bin Maryam alayhi salam, yeah?
Yeah.
Isa bin Maryam, yeah? In his time, the people, yeah, they crucified someone. But that wasn't Jesus. Jesus, we believe, was ascended to the heavens. God has got him there alive right now, and he's going to return. So I believe crucifixion came from that time.
Okay.
When they crucified the fake Jesus.
Right, now let me show you why you're wrong. This is quoting from the National US Library of Medicine, from a paper. The paper is The History and Pathology of Crucifixion. Listen to what it says. In antiquity, crucifixion was considered one of the most brutal and shameful modes of death. Probably originating with the Assyrians and Babylonians, it was used systematically by the Persians in the 6th century. Alexander the Great brought it from there to the Eastern Mediterranean, countries in the 4th century before Christ. And the Phoenicians introduced it into Rome in the 3rd century. It was virtually never used in pre-Hellenic Greece. The Romans perfected crucifixion for 500 years until it was abolished by Constantine I in the 4th century. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, crucifixion came after the Quran said that it did. The Quran says that crucifixion came in the time of the Egyptians, the pharaohs. That is a historical error. We know where crucifixion came from, and it wasn't Egypt.
The Quran is never ever a historical error. That's what you're reading is a historical error.
Based on what evidence?
Based on the evidence that they're human and they're not God.
Based on
the
what?
Quran is the word
That's
of
just
Allah,
your assertion.
The Lord of Jesus.
You're begging the question. That is your assertion. That is your assertion.
In understanding how the concept of crucifixion found its way into the story of Joseph in Surah 12:41, we must explore how the Quran was shaped by the cultural and religious landscape of 7th century Arabia, not by the authentic history of ancient Egypt. When the Quran narrates that Joseph interpreted a prisoner's dream by saying he would be crucified, this is not merely a story. It reflects the understanding and imagination of Muhammad's own time, not the historical context in which Joseph actually lived. Crucifixion was unknown in ancient Egypt. Executions were carried out by beheading, burning, drowning, or even throwing victims to crocodiles in the Nile. Therefore, crucifixion in the story of Joseph is not a reflection of historical reality, but a narrative shaped by cultural elements introduced centuries later. It is highly likely that the author of the Quran did not copy the story of Joseph directly from the Old Testament, but heard it through oral tradition, possibly from Jewish or Arab Christian communities around Mecca and Medina. In Christian tradition, the crucifixion of Jesus is absolutely central. The cross is the symbol of suffering, judgment, and redemption. It is no surprise, then, that the concept of the cross, so deeply embedded in the religious imagination of the Middle East at that time, unconsciously found its way into the Quranic retelling of Joseph's story. This was not divine revelation transcending time and space. It was a repetition of familiar ideas from the oral culture of Muhammad's era. What makes this even more apparent is that no ancient Jewish or Christian source ever mentioned crucifixion during Joseph's time. Even the Midrash and the Talmud, often allegorical and imaginative, never suggest crucifixion as a form of punishment in that era. So we are left with a critical question: where did this idea come from? The most logical answer is that the Qur'an's author imported the concept of crucifixion from his own cultural surroundings and mistakenly inserted it into a story set thousands of years earlier. This reveals something fundamental. The Qur'an does not present a historically accurate narrative across different eras. Rather, it resembles a collection of religious tales that passed through many voices and generations, ultimately blending time periods in an anachronistic way. In this case, the Quranic version of Joseph is not a timeless divine revelation, but a product of the post-Roman world, one already familiar with crucifixion as a method of execution. And so the sharp question must be asked: how can a revelation from the all-knowing God insert a Roman execution method into the setting of ancient Egypt? If the God of the Bible demonstrates historical accuracy in every age and prophecy, the Quran, by contrast, exposes its weakness, its inability to distinguish between true history and the myths of its local oral traditions. This is the difference between genuine revelation and a product of culture.
That is your assertion. That is your assertion. Who is Joseph?
Prophet Yusuf.
And what happened to Joseph?
What happened to him?
You see, he doesn't even know.
I know what happened to him.
So tell me, tell me, tell us.
You told me what you believe.
Tell us. Because he doesn't know. He doesn't know his own book.
I believe he was trapped in the, I believe the whole
So
story.
what happened to Joseph?
When the rich, powerful woman was trying to seduce
Where?
him in the castle.
Of?
I know everything.
Of?
Don't worry.
Which country?
Don't worry.
Which country?
Explain to me your version.
Okay, let me explain it to him because he's a bit sketchy on the details. So Joseph was thrown in prison.
You dilute your book.
And he was in prison in Egypt. Joseph is 1400 years BC. The Assyrians and the Babylonians are 800 years BC. Note the difference, some 600 years difference.
Okay, fair enough.
It was the Babylonians and the Assyrians that invented crucifixion. But the Quran says the following, putting words into the mouth of Joseph. When he was in prison with two of the companions of prison, this is what Joseph said: as to one of you, he will pour out the wine for his Lord to drink, and as for the other, he will be crucified. Crucifixion didn't even exist
How do you know that?
in 1400 years BC.
How do you know that?
Great question. I will tell you.
Tell me.
Because of
How do
his...
you know? Was he
I'm
there?
going to tell you.
What would you
I'm
tell
going
me?
to tell you. Because you don't know.
don't know.
Like you didn't know that the Quran even had the word crucifixion in it. Like you didn't know the story of Joseph.
There's probably more to
Like you
know.
didn't know that the translators agreed with me that the Quran used crucifixion. You didn't know. Because you're full of pride and your own arrogance and your own conceit,
I know it's the truth.
and you have no humility.
I know the Quran is the word of God.
So how do we know that the Assyrians and the Babylonians were the ones that came up with crucifixion? Because their documents,
fair enough.
their material evidence talk about it.
The law of the Torah that states, "Cursed is anyone who is hanged on a tree," at first appears to be a social regulation intended to preserve the holiness of the land of Israel. Yet in truth, it contains echoes of a far deeper prophecy. Through Moses, God embedded the principle that death by hanging on a wooden post, the most disgraceful form of punishment, would serve as a symbol of divine judgment and curse. In the context of Jewish law, a man hanged on a tree was not merely executed. He was publicly shamed, spiritually defiled, and symbolically rejected in totality. Centuries after Moses wrote that law, the world changed. Great empires rose and fell. Amidst the tides of history emerged pagan civilizations, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, that began using a brutal form of execution, crucifixion. This method was later adopted by the Greeks and ultimately perfected by the Romans. What's remarkable is that Rome did not merely conquer territories physically, they also brought their legal system, including crucifixion, into the lands they occupied, including Judea, the very land where Jesus would be born and crucified. And here lies the astonishing correlation. The law of Moses declared that anyone who died on a tree was cursed by God. And yet, during Moses' time, Israel had no knowledge of crucifixion as a form of execution. There was no cross in the Jewish penal tradition. But God knew that one day his Son would come into the world to bear the curse of humanity's sin. For that reason, his death had to align with the demands of his own law. Thus, God allowed foreign nations, who neither knew the Torah nor worshipped him, to bring crucifixion into Israel. Through Rome, God provided the cross, not merely as a product of human cruelty, but as the fulfillment of his redemptive plan established before the foundation of the world. Jesus was not stoned to death according to Jewish custom. He did not die in secret. He was hung on a tree just as it was written. He became the curse so that those living under the curse of the law might be redeemed. The cross became the point where history, law, and divine love intersected. It was not Moses who consciously prophesied the crucifixion, but God, through Moses, who planted the seed of the cursed tree within the Torah so that in the fullness of time, when the nations had shaped world history, the cross would be ready, not as an instrument of destruction, but as the pathway to salvation. Herein lies the glory of God, that even Roman occupation, with all its cruelty, bowed to divine design. And the cross, which once signified shame and condemnation, now stands forever as the symbol of love and eternal redemption.